In this video, I'm going to be sharing my top 3 crypto projects for 2024, why I chose each one, and going in and doing like a deep dive on the current state of each individual project. Some of these projects I believe have the potential to 100x or more next cycle, turning every $1,000 invested into $100,000 or more. And keep in mind, this is all just my personal investing strategy. I have a goal of hitting $100 million in net worth. Whether I'm right or wrong, this is, again, it's just my personal opinion, my personal investing strategy. I have money in these things I'm investing into. You'll find out if I'm right or wrong, and the market will deal out its own form of justice toward me if I end up picking dumb projects. So none of this is investment advice. None of this is me telling you to invest in any of these things. It's not even meant to be like, oh, here's some good picks for you. This is meant more to document my journey and like, here, this is what I'm trying. Maybe you can learn something from that, and that's the point of my videos. And with that in mind, really quick, let's recap some of the other projects that I've been talking about recently. Since talking about my investment into Render in my DPIN video back in August, it's up 54%. My investment into LivePeer from that same video is up 70%. Pendle, another one which I shared in a video 2 months ago, is up 82%. Rollbit, my one from my GambleFi video where I covered the whole GambleFi sector of crypto, is up 81%. K&K from that same video is up 54%. This one I got a bit lucky on. K&K is basically like the Rollbit of Solana, and Solana just recently kind of out of nowhere had this big run up. It ended up shooting up a bit. I guess I could like take some profit right now, but my whole goal with a lot of these plays is to wait until the next bull run. Like, I'm positioning myself for the next bull run. I'm not really positioning myself for any sort of short-term move. Winner, another one from that GambleFi video, is up 103%, which is amazing. And of course, my Akash position is up 225% since talking about it back in April. On the other hand, I have gotten it far from perfect, and I've also had some major misses. Goldfinch is down around 33% since I first talked about it. Optimism's token OP, which I've been massively bullish on and took kind of like an outsized position on, which I guess you guys probably don't know that, but I'm kind of telling on myself. I took a larger than normal position on Optimism. So far to date, it's up only 3%, and I've expected that to go up quite a bit. And Index, another one I took kind of a larger position on, another one that I'm like really bullish on, is down 41% since first sharing it. So I have some wins, but I've also had some misses, and I'm always just trying to get better and improve over time. I'm definitely far from perfect, but mistakes, I believe, if you learn from them, if you acknowledge them and you learn from them, allow you to grow and become a better investor. Also, just to quickly point out, obviously none of these were ever meant to be short-term trades in the first place. All of them were oriented towards the next bull run. I'm still really bullish on Optimism. I still think that it's going to do well during the next bull run. I'm still really bullish on Index, and I still think it's going to do well during the next bull run. So I'm still bullish on those concepts. I just, ended up getting into them at the wrong time, and maybe I am wrong about them, and maybe next bull run they won't perform. I guess we'll have to wait and see when that happens. And on a last note, it was really hard to narrow it down to just 3 investments. There are quite a few, like handful of investments that I'm really bullish on, that I really like for 2024, and I feel really strongly about. And honestly, I think I could have probably subbed in any number of this handful of investments into these top 3 slots and felt just as comfortable with them. So just because another project that I might like that I've talked about isn't in this top 3 doesn't mean I'm not super bullish on it. It just means I ended up not choosing it for this list. Okay, first up is one that I've already talked about in many videos, including I've already talked about it in this video, and that is Akash. Now, you might be tempted just to skip this one since I already said it's up 225% since the first time I talked about it back in April, and you kind of feel like maybe you already missed out on this one. But I personally believe that Akash actually has quite a bit of room to grow from here. The play with Akash is pretty simple. It's like the Airbnb of compute. Right now, we're experiencing a wave of AI startups and GPU demand. AI happens to need quite a bit of really powerful GPUs in order for them to function. And the more people that use these AIs, the more GPUs these AIs need. Also, the more that these AI companies want to improve their models, maybe they want to build bigger, more powerful models, the more GPU they need for that as well. And the thing is about these AI models, it's not just like OpenAI that wants to build AI models, or like Midjourney that wants to build, these AI models. Pretty much every company on the face of the planet is trying to build their own version of an in-house AI model. Apple, Google, Twitter, Facebook, Microsoft, IBM, Amazon, Salesforce, Alibaba, and literally hundreds more companies are in the process of either building out their own in-house AI or something similar. So they have this huge demand and need for a ton of compute. And this is why we saw Nvidia stock skyrocket over this past year. If you kind of want like a comparison, Tesla, one of, like everyone's favorite investments, is up 11% for the year. Nvidia is up a staggering 200 219% for the year. And it's really hard to appreciate just how big of a move NVIDIA went up without really looking at the market cap. NVIDIA is at a $1.1 trillion market cap. That's almost double the market cap of Bitcoin, and that's almost 5 times the market cap of ETH. And that means that NVIDIA, a single stock, a single private company, is almost bigger than the entire crypto market cap, every single crypto project that there is in existence put together. So why is it that NVIDIA is so massive? Why is it that NVIDIA is so valuable? Well, one of the reasons is because NVIDIA makes GPUs. And GPUs, like I've been saying, are the lifeblood of AI companies. It is the infrastructure that AI companies are built off of. You can't build powerful AI models and scale them without GPUs. And currently, the AI industry is experiencing this massive compute bottleneck. There just isn't enough compute to go around for people to build out the models they want to build. And this is where Akash enters the picture. Like I said, Akash is sort of like the Airbnb of compute. They allow users to sell their extra compute power, and then they allow other users to buy that extra compute power. See, at the same time that the AI industry is experiencing this compute bottleneck, there's actually a wealth of idle GPU power sitting all over the world. It's just historically, there's never been a way to connect these GPUs that aren't being used with the people that need to use them. And if you're having trouble kind of wrapping your head around like why there's a GPU compute shortage, but at the same time there's like idle GPU resources sitting all over the place that people could just use, think of it something like lawnmowers. How often do most people end up using their lawnmowers? Maybe, you use it once a week, but 99% of the time, you're probably not actually using your lawnmower. It's probably sitting in a shed or a garage or something somewhere. Now, in a perfectly efficient world, that lawnmower would be constantly getting used. If you don't need to use it 99% of the time, well, then ideally, the other 99% of the time that you're not using it, it should be used somewhere and you should be able to make money off of it, maybe renting it out or something. This is sort of similar to GPU. There's companies all over the world, they have GPU for various reasons. Maybe it's for AI, maybe it's not for AI, but for whatever reason, they're not using it 24/7. They have a big chunk of time or a big chunk of a period where they don't use that GPU, and they'd like to be able to maybe make some money off of it. It doesn't really hurt for them to connect into this marketplace and to rent it out. And whenever they need it, they can just unconnect it and they go use it for whatever purpose they're using it for. And then when, they're back to shelving that GPU and not using it, well, it could go on the marketplace and get used by people who are willing to pay for it. All right, so really quick, let's compare Akash's market cap to something like NVIDIA. This is a really loose comparison as obviously they're two very different companies, but the reason we're comparing them is both are AI narrative plays based around GPUs. Well, we already know that NVIDIA's market cap is a staggering $1.1 trillion. Akash, however, is much smaller, sitting at just 242 million or 426 million fully diluted. That means Akash is 4,545 times smaller than NVIDIA currently. And if Akash went up 4,545 times from today's prices, that would turn every $10,000 invested into $45 million. And I'm not crazy, and I don't think that, Akash is ever going to hit the market cap of NVIDIA. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just trying to highlight how small in the scheme of things Akash is currently. In my opinion, there's still a ton of room for upside for Akash if it achieves product market fit. And to compare the two, NVIDIA builds GPUs for companies to use, while Akash doesn't build anything. They just allow people with extra GPUs to rent them out. And a way I like to think about how to compare the two would be something like Marriott to Airbnb. Marriott is the largest hotel chain in the world, and it has a market cap of $57 billion. And what Marriott does is it builds hotels for people to use, while Airbnb doesn't build anything. They just allow people with extra rooms or extra space to rent them out. And Airbnb has a market cap of $76 billion. I think it's safe to say that there's a lot of potential here, but it relies heavily on Akash finding product market fit. So let's really quickly look at how Akash is doing so far. Akash's GPU supercloud launched in late summer. Since then, its GPU capacity has risen to 165 GPUs available to be used. To compare, according to this tweet, Midjourney uses more than 10,000 GPUs for its generative AI currently. So it seems like currently Akash doesn't actually have enough GPU for some of these larger use cases. So something like ChatGPT scale or Midjourney scale, where you have thousands of users actively and constantly using this thing, there's not enough GPUs in Akash's network to do something like that. Which, seeing as their GPU supercloud has only been live for a couple months, I think that's pretty understandable. These types of networks are typically pretty emergent, and that they have to strike this really weird balance where they have to have enough demand demand for people to want to supply the GPUs. And then they got to have enough, GPUs to meet that demand. And if they don't do those things hand in hand and kind of slowly, wiggle their way up, then they struggle to ever gain adoption. And striking a balance between that demand and supply can be really challenging as the company like this tries to scale. And as far as the current pricing for these GPUs compared to their competition, Akash does have some really competitive pricing, and I think that's a plus as well. Currently, revenue for Akash is extremely low, sitting at around $500 a day. On the other hand, though, they have clearly seen an increase in revenue since launching Akash ML, which I think that's at least some sort of a positive sign. So obviously, I'm not going to buy Akash based on the revenue metrics because those are pretty weak. I would either be buying Akash based on the fact that I think in the future that revenue is going to increase because they're going to find better product market fit. I think this is a good idea. And so, at some point in the future, this will end up taking off. That might be one reason that I would buy Akash, is because I think that. The other reason I might buy Akash is based on the AI crypto narrative. I might say, you know what? I think next crypto bull run, AI crypto projects, people are going to look at the revenue. Most people don't look at that anyway. They're not going to look at the metrics. They're just going to, say, oh, this is an AI crypto project. I want to buy it. It's going to skyrocket the price. People are, going to be kind of degen like they were last cycle. And I'm planning on making money that way. Or I might look at it and say, hey, Akash is actually pretty difficult to buy right now. Currently, the only way you can buy it is either you can go on Kraken, you can go on KuCoin, or you can buy it on chain on something like Osmosis. Kraken's somewhat of a major exchange, but it's still missing things like Coinbase and Binance. And so those people who only buy on Coinbase or only buy on Binance, they're going to have difficulty getting something like Akash. And even people that only buy on chain are going to have a difficulty getting something like Akash because maybe they're not familiar with something like Osmosis. So an exchange listing on something like Binance or Coinbase should also shoot the price of this up, and that would be another play that I can make. For me personally, it's kind of a mix of all three of those things. I think that Akash in the future has the potential to find some product market fit. I think they have the potential to find some revenue sources as more people start to trust things like Akash for their compute demand. I also think next cycle, the AI crypto narrative is going to be pretty frothy. I do think that most people probably aren't going to look at the metrics, and they're just going to buy things that they think are AI crypto projects. And I think Akash is a prime contender to be one of those cryptos people buy. And I also do think that there's some potential to see Akash listed on things like Coinbase and Binance, and for that to be a catalyst for growth. Now, my counter argument against Akash would probably be that there's quite a few projects that are going after sort of this same concept. And I would say some of the competition isn't that good, but some of the competition, like Render, is pretty well equipped to tackle this same kind of problem. I would also say that currently there is no proven product market fit for a concept like this. In theory, it sounds amazing, but in reality, will companies actually use it? That remains to be seen. Second up is Cow Protocol. Cow Protocol is a meta DEX aggregator protocol. Basically, it's a protocol that optimizes liquidity efficiency and fixes liquidity fragmentation by trading across all DEXs and all DEX aggregators, all while also protecting users from MEV attacks. The end result being that users get the absolute best trade possible when trading on chain. And I know this sounds really complicated, but I swear it's worth listening to. I personally have a pretty deep conviction about this project based on the technology, so it's worth understanding why this technology is different, because at first glance it kind of looks the same as something like 1inch. It kind of looks the same as something like Uniswap, and you're like, why should I care about this? I am personally really bullish on this project, and I think it's one that's worth paying attention to. When you do a normal trade with a normal DEX, it's going to look at its own liquidity sources within its own ecosystem. It's going to give you its best trade, and you're going to sign the transaction and execute that exact trade. With Cow Protocol, instead of making a normal trade, the user signs what's called an intent. Basically, you say to the market that you want to trade X token, and you're willing to trade it at X price. Then these things called solvers take your transaction, all the parameters that you've set, and it moves that transaction into what's called a batch auction. And this batch auction is made up of many different trades. And the solvers look at the auction as an entirety, as a whole, and they try to find the best way to physically possible settle each individual trade. So to make the trade, they look across every DEX. They look across every DEX aggregator. And they even look for what they call a coincidence of wants, which is basically two users within that same batch auction trying to do the opposite side of the same trade. So for example, maybe you're trying to sell some USDC to buy some ETH, and there's another guy in that batch auction who's trying to sell some ETH to get some USDC. That would be a coincidence of wants. And with the coincidence of wants, or COW, which is where the protocol gets its name, when they find these things, when they find one user who wants to, sell ETH for USDC, and they find another user who wants to sell USDC for ETH, they're actually able to make that trade peer-to-peer, and they don't have to tap into any source of liquidity, and there's a huge reduction in fees. Or obviously, in most instances, both traders aren't going to be trading the exact amount. So they'll do a portion of that trade through that coincidence of wants, and then they'll do the remainder of the trade through the on-chain liquidity. And the solvers who figure out kind of the best path to make the trade, they're motivated and rewarded based on their ability to be the ones to find the best way to execute that individual trade. The solvers take into account things like gas fees, slippage, price, and every other metric, that goes along with making a transaction. Then after identifying the optimal path for whatever individual trade, the winning solver solution is selected by the protocol and is executed for the user. Basically, think of like a normal DEX transaction as if you wanted to buy a used Xbox. And so you went to a single individual website. That website tells you exactly how much they'll sell that used Xbox for, exactly how much the shipping cost is, you pay them the money, and that's that. COW protocol would be like if instead you went to a different website where you posted what you wanted, a used Xbox, and how much you were willing to pay. Then that website took your order and submitted it to a group of professional searchers whose sole job was to find you the cheapest used Xbox on the face of the planet. And they're taking into account things like the cost of the Xbox, the cost of shipping, and every other individual fee imaginable. And those searchers look across, other websites. Maybe they look across garage sales. They look across Facebook Marketplace. They're looking in physical retail outlets. They're looking everywhere. They even look at their own client databases for other users who are trying to sell an Xbox and who would be maybe willing to drive to you so you can avoid shipping costs and fees altogether. Then the optimal solution is selected and you get an Xbox at the cheapest price physically possible. And all of this happens within the span of 30 to 60 seconds. So from the user's viewpoint, it basically looks like any other DEX transaction. You approve a transaction, you wait 30 or 60 seconds, and you get your tokens. And usually it comes with a neat banner showing you how much money you ended up saving. Now, all of this might sound eerily familiar if you've ever dug into what Uniswap's doing with their V4 and Uniswap X releases. That's because Uniswap's big vision for their future is basically an exact copy of what CowSwap's already built. COW Protocol pioneered all these fancy new features that Uniswap's trying to add to their own platform. And like I said, unlike Uniswap, COW Protocol has already built these things and already has them fully functional. In fact, they had these things already fully functional before Uniswap had ever even made an announcement that they wanted to go this direction. To me, that says a lot about the skills of the COW Protocol team when even, big companies like Uniswap are lagging behind in terms of innovation. And here's the really crazy part in my opinion. COW Protocol is currently sitting at just 15 million in market cap, while Uniswap is at almost $3 billion in market cap. So you have this really tiny protocol that's outpacing on the innovation front their much bigger competition. To me, this seems like a potential massive opportunity. COW Protocol launched this token during the bear market a month before the Luna collapse. So that means it's a newer token that never has had a bull run move up, which typically newer tokens tend to do really well historically during a bull run. COW Protocol currently pulls in about 3.65 million in fees, and their 30-day revenue is 296,000, which puts them at potentially 3.6 million annualized. They have a treasury with about 6.2 million in funds. Most of that's either stables, ETH, or Genosis. And they have around $500,000 worth of their own token in their treasury as well. At least that's how they show it on the report, because I think they're highlighting the fact that they have $500,000 worth of their own token farming, probably in their liquidity pool. In actuality, they have a lot more than $500,000 worth of their token in their treasury wallet. If you actually look at the wallet address, they have close to $40 million worth of their own token in their treasury, which I'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. So they have $3.6 million in projected revenue currently, despite being tiny. They have 5.7 million in treasury assets, excluding their own token. At face value, it looks like they're innovating faster and better than Uniswap is by not only a little bit, but by leaps and bounds. And to top it all off, their market cap is just $15 million. To me, if you add all that up, it feels like this could potentially be a pretty powerful play during the next bull run. Uniswap last cycle hit a market cap of $22 billion. If COW Protocol were to reach that same height, it would go up 1,466x from here. That would turn every $1,000 invested into $1.4 million. But let's be conservative and say they never, reach that height and they just hit 1.5 billion in market cap. That would be 100x from today's prices. Now, there is something to take note of, and that's that the fully diluted value of Cal Protocol is around 90 million currently. If you don't understand the difference between market cap and fully diluted value, market cap is the total if you account for all the tokens currently in circulation. Fully diluted value is if you account for all the tokens that are available, but also accounting for the ones that aren't currently in circulation. So currently, where are all these tokens sitting that aren't in circulation? Well, if you look on chain, the majority of these tokens are sitting in the DAO's treasury. Earlier, I mentioned that the DAO has around $40 million worth of their own tokens sitting in their treasury wallet. And you always got to look at what is the risk of, these tokens that currently aren't in circulation coming onto the market and coming into circulation, because that's going to be a negative pressure on the price, especially if people are selling those tokens. My assessment is, given their current revenue and given their current proposal that they have in their governance form to tap into their current fee structure, I think that the risk is pretty small that they end up selling any majority of these tokens that are currently sitting in their treasury. I think that they'd probably face pretty decent amount of backlash, because that would be pretty negative for the price action. And I don't see why they would do that when they already have other revenue sources that they can tap into just fine. Of course, though, it is always possible. It's always possible that they do end up selling some of those, and that would be, of course, a bearish scenario for this token. It's also worth noting that there is other tokens outside of just those tokens in the treasury. The majority of the tokens are the tokens in the treasury, but there's a smaller amount that went to team allocation, that went to early investors, that's on a 4-year vesting schedule that's slowly unlocking. I don't see that being as much of an issue as far as like sell pressure goes. Again, the majority of them are sitting in this treasury. My counter argument for Cal Protocol would basically be that like Cal Protocol is like Snapchat stories and Uniswap is like Instagram stories. And so, Cal Protocol, it's cool right now while it's a unique feature for what it has. But as soon as Uniswap adopts all these same feature sets into their own protocol, what's to stop them from really dominating the market and everyone kind of forgetting about Cal Protocol and it just kind of getting left in the dust? After all, Uniswap has the brand recognition, they have the market share, and the vast majority of on-chain trading happens currently through something like Uniswap. And we know this is what happened with Snapchat Stories. Snapchat Stories did good for a while, then Instagram ended up, taking that feature and adding it to its own app. And then, Snapchat Stories kind of died off, or at least it was not nearly as popular, and it became really, really popular on Instagram. On the other hand, in more of a bullish scenario, maybe Cal Protocol is like TikTok, where, you're going to have Uniswap, you're going to have these other protocols adopt these same features, but it's still going to allow something like Cal Protocol to thrive because they're an innovative team and they can build really cool things. My assessment is I think that Cal Protocol is an innovative team. I think they're going to continue to build really cool things. Being smaller and nimble, they're going to continue to take risk and maybe hopefully innovate at a quicker speed. But even if they do get outpaced and, maybe usurped by something like Uniswap, I think there are a couple things going for them. They're really small market cap currently. So maybe next cycle, it doesn't go to, $1.5 billion or it doesn't go to $22 billion, but maybe it goes to something like 100 million or 150 million, which, wouldn't be as crazy, obviously, but it's also not something that I'm going to complain about. And lastly, as I mentioned, the token hasn't yet been listed on any major exchanges, and that's always a price catalyst that could, propel the token to much higher prices in the future. So I'm betting next cycle, we see some pretty decent action for Cal Protocol. My third token and last up is Rollbit. As mentioned earlier in my video, this one is already up 81% since the last time I talked about it. But I personally think it has plenty of room to grow quite a bit higher from here. Rollbit is a GambleFi platform, and you don't really need to know a ton about the tech to know why this is a valuable token. Instead, I'm purely valuing this token based on its current revenue. Currently, the 30-day revenue for Rollbit's casino is $26.9 million. Their 30-day revenue for their futures market is $8.8 million, and their 30-day revenue for their sports betting is $6.1 million. Totaled, that's nearly $42 million in 30-day revenue. And annualized, that's around $503 million in revenue a year. Of this revenue, 10% of the casino revenue, 30% of the futures revenue, and 20% of the sports betting revenue is used to buy back the RLB token and burn it, acting as a constant buying pressure on the price. Going back to revenue versus market cap, in my last video, I gave this example. Tesla's market cap at the time of my last video was $831 billion, and their revenue is $81 billion. That's about a 10x revenue to market cap ratio. And keep in mind, this is during the bear market. These numbers disconnect substantially during the bull run. So during a bear market, people are more reasonable. They invest, maybe more based on fundamental metrics. During a bull market, people kind of lose their minds. They lose control of their emotions, and they just throw all those metrics out the window. And sometimes these things will disconnect substantially from the revenue and be valued much, much higher in proportion to the revenue. Rollbit, at the time of my last video, was actually valued less than their annual revenue, which was absurd. And the only reason that I could wrap my head around why that would be the case is because maybe a lot of people don't know about Rollbit's revenue, or maybe just, it's the fact that the crypto market's pretty young and revenue is a newer concept. A lot of these projects have been theoretical concepts that have produced zero revenue, and they're still trying to find product market fit. So maybe that's just something in the crypto market people don't pay as much attention to. Currently though, since the price of Rollbit has gone up a bit since my last video, it's valued at about 1.5 times its own revenue. So that's good. It's valued a little bit more in line with its revenue, but it still seems quite a bit low. And my belief is that we're going to continue to see RLB climb higher until it reaches at least like 5 times to 10 times its own revenue. And I think during a full-fledged bull run, we actually see that revenue go substantially higher, because a lot of these people are just crypto investors. And when crypto investors have a lot more money, they're probably going to be willing to gamble a lot more money, because that's what crypto investors do during a bull run. They start throwing money at everything. And so I would imagine the revenue on Rollbit would go up quite a bit during a crypto bull run. And at the same time, I think that those metrics will disconnect like I talked about earlier. So not only do I think that the revenue would go up quite a bit during a bull run, but I think that it would be valued at more than 10 times the revenue, because people, again, kind of lose sight of those things in a full-fledged bull run as they get in kind of their manic mania state. The biggest risk I see for the Rollbit token is threefold. First off, with this kind of revenue, they are sure to see a ton of different competitors come onto the market, launch, and try to compete against Rollbit, and that can eat away at Rollbit's revenue. So maybe they, none of these competitors are really successful and they don't do nearly as good as Rollbit, but maybe each one of them steals like 3% or 5% of Rollbit's revenue away from them. And say they have like 10 to 30 different competitors, that could be a pretty substantial hit to the revenue for Rollbit. Second, for a variety of reasons, we could see the revenue for Rollbit dry up over time. Like I just said, maybe it's some competitors, maybe it's a single competitor, or maybe people decide they want to gamble in crypto in different ways. They want to buy meme coins or something like that. Like, I don't know exactly why it would happen, but I know, there is a risk of, that revenue drying up for other different reasons. Third, we could always see some sort of regulatory scrutiny around platforms like Rollbit. I don't personally understand the ins and outs of the political scene when it comes to like gambling and different things like that, but I know it's not looked upon kindly. It's kind of like a taboo thing that, sometimes politicians, they want some clout, they want to flex, and so they go after, gambling, and they go after, all kinds of different things that kind of sit in that same basket. And given how hard politicians have tried to paint crypto in an unfavorable light, they're trying to say that crypto is used for all this illicit finance and blah, 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 which by the way is completely untrue. It's complete lie disconnected from the facts. If you actually look at the numbers in 2022, only 0.24% of crypto transactions were tied to illicit finance, 0.24%. And they make it seem like the entire crypto space is all just illicit finance. It's just wild that they try to claim that. But anyways, there's people like Elizabeth Warren, they're like dead set on like killing off crypto. But I definitely could see there's a risk of somebody coming out of the woodwork and be like, oh, that's a crypto gambling app. We got to shut that down. That's super bad, because gambling and crypto combined, or whatever, something like that. Anyway, for me overall, I do think Rollbit is a good play. I've put money into it. I've accepted those risks as always a possibility, but you can't live in fear, and you gotta make some moves and take some risks if you're gonna try to hit a $100 million goal, which is what I'm trying to do. So as always, if the video is helpful, make sure to hit that like button. If you have any questions or comments, or you have any cryptos that you think should be in the top 3 down below, let me know. Like I said, there's other ones I probably could have just put in here instead of these 3, but these are the 3 I ended up choosing for the video. If you want to see more videos like this, make sure to hit the subscribe button and the little bell next to it to be notified each time I release a video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.